Greetings to everyone. I am Rica.
I am Jazcha.
I am Hazel.
I am Chelsie.
I am Reyneelyn.
We are the Group 2 and our report is about Module 8, the organizational context. Here we see the contents of our topic, the introduction, identifying different stakeholders, organizational functions, the influence of organizational structure, influence of leadership, the influence of organizational culture, the organizational context in the international perspective, and the summary. So this topic, titingnan lang natin siya na mahaba, pero it is mostly about explanation lang naman ng internal environment sa isang organization. So kung ano ba yung mga kaganapan within the organization. Here are the learning objectives. So after this report, we will be able to identify different elements of an hospitality and tourism organization's internal environment, discuss the complexity of hospitality and tourism organizations' internal environment, analyze an H&T organization's internal environment, and evaluate the influence of organizational variables or factors on strategy formulation and implementation, and provide recommendations to overcome potential challenges in this process. So, di ba, nung last chapter, diniscuss sa atin ni Sir yung mga nangyayari outside the premises ng isang business. Yun ang tinatawag natin na external environment. So, mga forces yon na hindi na kaya ng power ng isang business na kontrolin pa yon. Ngayon naman, our group will discuss to you the business internal environment and its influence on the strategy formation and implementation. So, may mga key concept tayo na matatackle throughout this report, such as the organizational structure, organization culture, and leadership, na importante sa international hospitality and tourism industry. Tapos, may madidiscuss din sa report namin na ibang forces or factors sa external environment that influences the internal environment and the functioning of an organization. Let's begin with identifying different stakeholders. So I think hindi na tayo bago sa word na stakeholders kasi kadalasan na nating naririnig to, di ba? Pero identify pa rin natin ano at sino nga ba yung mga stakeholders in hospitality and tourism organizations by simply defining what is stakeholders. So si Freeman noong 1984, nagbigay siya ng definition. Sinasabi niya na ang stakeholder is any group or individual who can affect or is affected by the achievement of a firm's objectives. So stakeholders, pwede siyang individual or group, and interested sila sa success ng isang business. Importante din itong stakeholders kasi hindi lang sa industry natin importante. So pwede din sa iba pang industry kasi without their support, the organizations would cease to exist. Tapos, in relation naman sa hospitality and tourism industry, they have broad range of stakeholders. Kasi this industry is one of the biggest industries in the world, di ba yung industry natin? Kaya they have different number of key stakeholders. So, bigyan ko kayo ng example ng mga stakeholders in tourism. So, government, di ba yan, kauna-unahan yan sa long list of stakeholders in tourism. Meron din employees, suppliers, communities, etc. So kahit tayo as a tourist, considered tayo as a tourism stakeholders. Ngayon, dahil yung industry natin is malawak yung sakop ng stakeholders, isa sa mga main concerns nila ngayon ng H&T organizations ay kung paano i-manage yung mga interest ng different stakeholders. Kasi bago magplano and gumawa ng actions within the organization, dapat may mga idea ka na in advance kung paano ba magre-react yung different stakeholders na yon. Therefore, ang pag-identify ng stakeholders' needs, expectations, and predicted responses ay sobrang importante. In able to meet the needs of those stakeholders, may 3 general questions tayo about the stakeholders. First is, who are they? What are they? And then the last is, how are they going to try to get it? So sa una muna tayo, since maraming ang different stakeholders in tourism, identify muna natin kung sino yung specific stakeholders na yon and ano yung mga characters nila that can affect your organization. These include customers, shareholders, employees, suppliers, bankers, and community and pressure groups, including the environmental groups, or employee unions. And those individual may iba't iba silang attributes. Next naman, what they want. So, ito naman tungkol lang ito sa mga interest nila. So, yung mga stakeholders, given na yan na interested sila sa success ng isang organization. Pero, tinutukoy dito kung ano yung mga specific na interest nila para sa sarili nila, ganon. So, dapat you are providing or offering something na interesado yung organization na yon or stakeholders na yon. And iba-iba din yung mga expectations ng bawat stakeholders. So, finally, how are they going to try to get it? So para naman masagot itong last question about stakeholders, dapat mayroong careful analysis sa impluwensya ng bawat stakeholders sa organization. Pati na rin yung mga means ng stakeholders para ma-achieve yung mga needs and expectations nila. For example, yung government, di ba, isa siya sa mga stakeholders in H&T organization. And then, kaya ng government, mapa-local, regional, or national man, na ma-monitor yung activities ng isang organization, tapos gamitin nila yung power and influence nila to withhold the flow of firms' resources. And then another example is yung mga customers, community, and the pressure groups. So pwede nilang i-boycott yung services or products ng isang firm just to force the organization toward a certain direction. And then stakeholders' interests are the foundation of corporate strategy itself, representing what are we and what we stand for as a company. So dapat talaga yung mga organizations mag-establish sila ng mga fundamental principles that would guide how it does business, particularly with respect to how they treat the stakeholders. So sabi ang mga shareholders, yung shareholders interest daw, ang dapat palaging mauuna kahit na marami pang ibang stakeholders in H&T organization. Kasi shareholders, sila yung mga kadalasan na may control over the resources that facilitates or enhances the implementation of corporate decisions. Kaya naman dapat responsive talaga ang H&T organization sa needs and interests ng mga shareholders. Kasi yung type ng stakeholder na yon, yung parang nagmamonitor sa activities ng H&T organizations. So yung organizations, they should always keep in mind the shareholders' influence. Next, agency theory nagsuggest na yung senior executive and managers in organizations may make decision and allocate resource to strengthen their position and gain personal benefits. So yung mga decisions, initiatives, and resource allocations ay pwedeng hindi suportahan ng mga senior executive and managers, especially that if they think those initiatives are a threat to their position. And then, threats to their position kahit na it could be beneficial for the organizations. Following the agency theory, one other important group of stakeholders in H&T organization is the executive and managers. So, syempre, yung mga yon expert na yan sa field nila kasi hindi naman sila magiging executive and managers kung wala silang skills, ganon. So, yung expertise nila, makakatulong sa may H&T organizations sa pag-analyze ng internal environment, as well as its decisions, investment, and mga future projects. Next, we have the organizational functions. So dito nakapaloob lang yung how business operates, and this influences an organization's ability to respond to the changes in the dynamic external environment. So this can be divided into 4 main areas. So yung 4 na to, yung operations function, marketing function, human resources function, and the finance function. So una muna is yung operations function. It deals with the day-to-day operations of the system. So mga basic na activities lang in organization. Example dito is yung controlling or the production of products. Next ay yung marketing function. So dito naman yung pag-develop ng appropriate pricing policy and yung pag-promote ng business through television, magazines, and the internet. So di ba marami na tayong mga ways ngayon para makapag-advertise or makapag-market ng products or services. So pangatlo, human resources function. It deals with the employee selection and recruitment issues and addresses the needs and wants of employees by monitoring pay and reward systems, training, and empowerment policy. So ginagawa kasi nila yon, mga organizations ginagawa yon, yung mga pay and reward system for the employees na ma-motivate. Kasi di ba, if hindi motivated ang employee, pwede rin na hindi maayos yung service na ibibigay nila sa customers. Sa industry pa naman natin, sobrang importante ng high quality services, di ba? So sa function na to, papasok yung mga pag-assess din ng human assets ng isang organization if nakakadagdag sa value and competitive ng organizations, yung human assets na yon. The last function ay yung finance function. So sa function na to, basically about siya sa funds or pondo ng isang organization or kaya mga financier or kaya sources that will support them in funding or financing their operations. This function also carries out a systematic analysis of how different financial resources add value and contribute to competitive advantage ng isang business. So when carrying out an internal analysis of an H&T organization, importante na ma-analyze din yung 4 na functional area na to, yung nabanggit ko. And then, para ma-identify yung mga potential strengths and weaknesses na pwede rin manggaling sa mismong 4 na functional areas. Tapos yung mga strengths and weaknesses na yon, pwedeng combination yun ng 2 magkaibang functional areas or madalang lang yung isa lang. So, pero either way, dapat ma-analyze pa rin yung 4 functional areas na yon when carrying an internal analysis of hospitality and tourism organizations. Resources, core competencies, and distinctive competencies is the next topic and will be explained by Ms. Jazcha Manicad.
The resources, core competencies, and distinctive competencies, sinasabi dito na sa isang organization na related sa hospitality and tourism industry, ay kailangan muna natin i-identify ang mga resources in terms of tangible and intangible upang malaman natin kung gaano kadami ang supply ng stock, materials, staff, and other asset that a person nakakailanganin pagdating sa industriya upang mag-function ito ng maayos. At para malaman din natin kung gaano kadami ang ilalabas na kapital. Ang tangible assets sa isang organization can be seen in the form of a plant, equipment, and land used in a company's operation to produce profit. Ang best example dito ay ang mga building company ng isang hotel. Dahil alam natin na ang building ay isang example of tangible asset dahil bukod sa nahahawakan at nakikita natin ito ay may long-term resources ito na tumatagal ng taon. Ang tangible asset can be divided into 2 main categories. The first is the current assets. Ito ay tumutukoy sa short-term resources that will be spent in the current period such as inventory. Kasi alam natin na ang inventory ay hindi ito nakapix at nagbabago-bago ito araw-araw. Ang sumunod naman ay ang fixed assets. Ito naman ay tumutukoy sa long-term resources or pangmatagalan. Ang halimbawa nito ay ang mga building, vehicles, at machine dahil alam natin ang mga ito ay tumatagal ng taon. The next resources are an intangible asset. It is an asset that is not physical in nature like in a brand recognition and intellectual properties such as patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Although brand recognition is not a physical asset that can be seen or touched, it can have a meaningful impact on generating sales. Ang core capabilities and distinctive competencies ay binubuo ng tangible asset na related ito kung ano ang mayroon ng isang kumpanya. At intangible asset naman ay kung ano ang maaaring gawin ng kumpanya. Core capabilities refer to those areas that the H&T company does exceedingly well na ginagawa itong sentro ng mga aktibidad sa pagbuo ng epektibong pamamaraan. Whereas distinctive competencies refer to those areas and activities that the company excels and better than its competitors. Ito naman ay isang kakayahan ng ibang mga kumpanya na mahirap gayahin. Ang core capabilities ay sinasabi na this is the most critical and distinctive asset pagdating sa pagpuproseso ng organization. And they are the most difficult to copy when effectively linked with appropriate strategic targets in a value chain that begins and ends with the company's key stakeholders. Sinasabi dito ng H&T organization ay dapat pagsamahin ang kanilang mga pangunahing kakayahan kasama ang kanilang espesyal na kaalaman at kaalamang panteknolohiya na nakikilala sila mula sa ibang proseso ng negosyo na ginagamit nila upang makapaghatid ng mga information in the form of products, services, and other results. Habang padami ng padami ang mga competitor sa bansa, ay mabilis din na naihahambing ang mga tangible assets sa kadahilanan na madaming sumusulpot ng mga imitation products na kailangan protektahan ng H&T organization. at pagbutihin ang pagsagawa ng mga unique strategy in terms of intangible assets. Alam natin na ang bansa natin ay puno ng mapagkumpetensyang kalamangan, subalit sa tulong ng pag-apila ng mga customer ay nakakatulong ito pagdating sa merkado. Sinasabi din dito na ang napapanatiling mapagkumpetensyang kalamangan ay nagbibigay resulta sa pagbuo at pagsasama-sama ng maraming mga natatanging kakayahan na sa huli ay mahirap gayahin at palitan ng mga competitors. To better explain this issue, we need to refer to the research-based view or RBV in the strategic management field. The RBV suggests that competitive advantage comes from a firm's unique tangible and intangible resources. Kung gusto mo talagang mag-succeed, dapat maging competitive ka sa lahat ng pagkakataon. Yung tipong hindi ka basta-bastang sumusuko. For example, nalugi ang iyong business dahil nagkaroon ka lang ng kakompetensya sa iyong product or services. Pero ang nasa isip mo ay hindi mo na ito kayang masolusyonan. Sa ganitong sitwasyon, dapat ay may nakaredy ka ng alternative plan kung ano ang mga dapat mong gawin para makabangon ulit ang iyong business. In order for a resource to be a competitive advantage, it must be valuable, rare, inimitable, and substitutable, and the firm should be organized in a way that it can be effectively exploit to the resources. To protect your valuable asset mula sa panggagaya, kailangan gumawa ng maayos na plano ang mga kumpanya ng H&T sa iba't ibang mga lugar na connected ang lahat ng mga resources at kakayahan upang matugunan ang bawat isa. Sa pamamagitan nito, ay maaaring lumikha ng mga hadlang sa mga competitors na gayahin hindi lamang ang lahat ng mga pangunahing mapagkukunan, ngunit din upang lumikha ng mga koneksyon sa kanila. Sinasabi din dito na maraming kumpanya ang umunlad sa loob ng maraming taon at nauhubog ng natatanging kultura, kasaysayan at tagapagtatak na samahan at sa makatuwid ang kanilang mga katunggali ay hindi basta-bastang nagagaya ang kanilang culture and history ng isang bansa. The next is the influence of organizational structure. Organizational structure can be defined as a coordination of workflow and communication and management of authority relationship in an organization. Ito ay isang sistema na nagbabalangkas kung paano nakadirekta ang mga ilang aktibidad upang makamit ang mga layunin ng isang samahan. Ang mga aktibidad na ito ay maaaring magsama ng mga patakaran, tungkulin at responsibilidad. Tinutukoy din sa organizational structure kung paano dumadaloy ang impormasyon sa pagitan ng mga antas sa loob ng kumpanya. It said that it is critical antecedent to decision making. Kaya critical ito sa pagsasagawa ng mga desisyon dahil hindi ito basta-basta magbibigay ka lang ng desisyon. Kailangan ay pag-isipan at pag-aaralan mo ito ng mabuti dahil nakasalalay dito ang tagumpay ng isang company. Sa tulong din ng kung sino ang magpapasya at kung paano magagawa ang pagpapasya. Ang organizational structure ay nakaka-impluwensya sa paraan ng pagsasaayos ng mga gawain, tungkulin, aktibidad, coordination, communication at mga paraan ng paglalaan ng mapagkukunan. There are several types of organizational structure can be seen in H&T organizations, which can include functional, multidivisional, and matrix. In order for us to better understand, I will explain it one by one. The first is a functional structure. It refers to the activity that an organization works to perform such as operation, marketing of human resources, and finance. Ibig sabihin nito ay ang bawat isa ay may responsibilidad pagdating sa pagpaplano, pag-o-organize at pagkakaroon ng self-confidence na kayang pagtagumpayan ang isang gawain. The next is a multidivisional structure. It refers to the existence of separate division based on products, services, and geographical areas. Sa word pa lang ng multi, it means more than one. At mayroong iba't ibang sangay ng istruktura. Under each division or geographical region are functional areas such as operations, marketing, human resources, and finance. Sa isang multidivisional na istruktura ay mayroong isang kumpanya na binubuo ng iba't ibang mga dibisyon na nagpapatakbo sa iba't ibang uri ng negosyo. Legally, the parent company owns all the division, but the parent companies give the divisions significant independence, allowing them to act independently. And the last structure is a matrix structure. Ito ang mga kagawaran na ginagamit tulad ng marketing sa pamamahala ng mga mapagkukunan ng tao, pananalapi, pananaliksik at pag-unlad na itinalaga upang gumana sa isa o higit pang mga unit ng negosyo o pangheografiya. Binubuklod ito bilang isa kung saang mayroon multi-managerial responsibility. Sa isang matrix, karaniwan mayroong command kung saan ang isa ay may line-up sa pagbuo ng proyekto, produkto, or paghihikayat sa mga customers. The other issue that agency organization need to assess is whether their organization has a centralized or decentralized organizational structure. Kung ang isang organisasyon ng HNT ay may isang sentralisadong istruktura, nangangahulugang ito na ang kapangyarihan at responsibilidad sa paggawa ng desisyon ay hawak ng pinakamataas na pamamahala. Kung ang management structure naman ay decentralized, ang mga samahan sa mas mababang antas ng hierarchy ay binibigyan ng responsibility na magdesisyon. Developing an appropriate organizational structure helps to facilitate the implementation of strategies and processes that help a market. The bureaucratic obstacles and control-oriented approaches, it is a decision-making that will demotivate the members of the organization. Sa madaling salita, dinidiscourage nila ang mga ideas and expression pagdating sa mga novels, teamwork, at nagkakaroon ito ng negative impact pagdating sa organizational learning about customer and competition. A decentralized structure would facilitate in terms of communication at sa pagbuo ng tiwala sa pagitan ng mga top management at kanilang mga empleyado. Ang isang desentralisadong istruktura ay humahantong sa malawak na pakikilahok o mga kasapi ng organization sa pagbuo ng diskarte at pagpapatupad. At sa ganon ay magiging sa kanila na ang ownership at strategy process. Although agency organization may enjoy the advantages of decentralized structure, it is not wise to stretch the limit of decentralization. Minsan, sinasabi dito na ang decentralization ay humahantong sa pagkalito tungkol sa madiskarteng pagtuon ng kumpanya sa mga empleyado na nagre-resulta sa mga diskarte ng ad hoc approaches to organizational behavior. Batay kay Simons, siya ang nagpakilala ng modelo na tinatawag na levers of control na naglalayong kilalanin ang balanse sa pagitan ng formalidad at kakayahang umangkop sa isang samahan. Iminumungkahi ng modelong ito na ang control system ay dapat gamitin sa isang paraan na sa halip na hadlangan ang makabagong pag-uugali at nagtakda din ito ng isang malinaw na direksyon at pagtugon para sa mga empleyado at pumukaw sa kanila na tumugon sa mga madiskarteng prioridad ng samahan. The 4 levers of control will continue to be explained by Hazel Alivia.
Bago ko i-discuss yung 4 na levers ng control, alamin muna natin kung ano ang levers of control. Levers of control or tinatawag din na management control system is explained as formal systems and procedures that use information to maintain or change patterns of activity within the organization. It represents the organization's desire to achieve its goal by providing information that is useful in decision-making, planning, and performance evaluation. The levers of control contains 4 instruments that can serve as a lever to better control an organization. Each of the 4 control levers has a distinct purpose for managers attempting to harness the creativity of employees. In order for us to better understand these 4 systems, let's explain them one by one. First is diagnostic systems. Diagnostic control systems work like the dials on the control panel of an airplane cockpit, enabling the pilot to scan for signs of abnormal functioning and to keep critical performance variables within preset limits. Karamihan sa mga negosyo ay nagre-rely sa diagnostic control systems para matulungan ang mga manager na ma-track yung progress ng mga individual, departamento o mga pasilidad sa produksyon toward strategically important goals. Ginagamit ng mga manager ang system na to para ma-monitor nila yung goals and profitability at para ma-measure din nila yung progress toward targets gaya ng revenue growth and market share. Periodically, managers measure the outputs and compare them with preset standards of performance. Feedback allows management to adjust and fine-tune inputs and processes so that future outputs will more closely match goals. Second is interactive systems. Interactive control systems are the formal information systems that managers use to involve themselves regularly and personally in the decisions of subordinates. These systems are generally simple to understand. Through them, senior managers participate in the decisions of subordinates and focus organizational attention and learning on key strategic issues. Ang system na to ay nakafocus sa patuloy na pagbabago ng impormasyon na kinoconsider ng mga senior manager as potentially strategic. Next is belief systems. Sa loob ng maraming taon, ang mga kumpanya ay gumagamit ng belief systems upang maipahayag ang mga halaga at direksyon na nais ng mga senior manager na i-embrace ng kanilang mga empleyado. Typically, belief systems are concise, value-laden, and inspirational. They draw employees' attention to key tenets of the business on how the organization creates value, like best customer service in the world, the level of performance the organization strives for, like pursuit of excellence, and how individuals are expected to manage both internal and external relationships, like respect for the individual. Belief systems can be thought of as the yang to the yin of boundary systems. And last is boundary systems. Boundary systems are based on a simple yet profound management principle na maaaring tawaging power of negative thinking. Halimbawa, kung gusto ko maging creative and entrepreneurial yung mga empleyado ko, dapat ko bang sabihin sa kanila yung dapat nilang gawin o sabihin sa kanila ang hindi nila dapat gawin? The answer is the latter because telling people what to do by establishing standard operating procedures and rule books discourages the initiative and creativity unleashed by empowered entrepreneurial employees. But telling them what not to do allows innovation, but within clearly defined limits. Unlike diagnostic control systems, which monitor critical performance outcomes, or belief systems, which communicate core values, boundary systems are stated in negative terms or as minimum standards. The boundaries in modern organizations, embedded in standards of ethical behavior and codes of conduct, are invariably written in terms of activities that are off limits. They are an organization's brake. Every business needs them, and like racing cars, the fastest and most performance-oriented companies need the best brakes. Next is the influence of leadership. Leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act towards achieving a common goal. In a business setting, this can mean directing workers and colleagues with a strategy to meet the company's needs. According to Pitaway, Chel, and Testa, every H&T organization has key individuals, leaders with skills, ability, and vision to nurture and enable the organization to develop a business strategy, identify the resources required, and nurture other employees to turn their ideas into business reality. Ang mga leaders sa H&T organizations ay dapat mayroong broad vision, ability to think creatively and intuitively, at may kakayahang impluwensyahan ang iba. Minsan nakikita sila as exceptional individuals na nagbibigay ng creative ideas, nagdadala ng pagbabago at may kakayahang i-implement ito. Sinasabi dito na lahat ng organisasyon ay kailangan ng leaders dahil sila yung karaniwang may kakayahang mag-introduce ng innovative solutions para masolusyonan yung problema ng isang organisasyon. Therefore, leaders act like initiators of continuous change. Leaders can also facilitate organizational learning by bringing business opportunities to the attention of others' organizational members and networking externally with both suppliers and customers. Ang organizational learning ay mahalaga para sa lahat ng kumpanya dahil ang paglikha, pagpapanatili at paglilipat ng kaalaman sa loob ng samahan ang magpapalakas sa organisasyon bilang isang kabuuan. Leaders have the ability to sense the dynamic changes in the internal and external environments and therefore can act like a hinge between the internal environment of their organization and the external stakeholders, such as customers and suppliers. Next, their entrepreneurial skills and attributes are particularly critical in introducing innovation solutions to their organization's problems across borders. They are creative and good reflectors. They assess the risks involved in working with foreign operations. They employ a hands-on management style in bringing a business idea into successful creation by considering the cross-cultural obstacles in different country market. While identifying business opportunities, they take ownership and are accountable for their activities. They utilize their creative and flexible thinking, risk-taking, and ultimately risk-reducing skills. Leadership have different styles which are authoritative, persuasive, consultative, and participative decision-making. At ang mga ito ay maaaring mapadali o hadlangan ang mabisang paggawa ng desisyon. Sinasabi dito na kahit ano pang leadership style ang gamitin, ay nakadepende pa rin sa background, skills at abilities ng isang leader ang success ng decision-making at ang pag-implement ng strategy. Sinasabi din dito na ang mga idea at strategy ay dapat suportahan at pahalagahan ng leadership both by their physical presence and by making sure na ang company resources are available para suportahan ang kanilang mga empleyado sa kanilang mga pagsisikap sa negosyo. Ang mga leaders ay dapat gumawa ng personal commitment para suportahan ang mga makabagong ideya. Hindi ka magiging effective leader ng walang commitment because it is a leadership quality that inspires and attracts people. Ipinapakita nito na ang leader ay may paniniwala and that the leader believes in the cause. A team will buy into the team leader before they buy into the vision. Leadership should undertake the role of creating a supportive culture where new ideas are nurtured and encouraged, and they should also see themselves as supporters of their subordinates. Habang bumubuo at nagpapatupad ng mga bagong ideya at pamamahala ng pagbabago sa mga organisasyon, ang mga leader ay kailangang gumamit ng makapanghikayat na komunikasyon, negosasyon at kasanayan sa pakikinig upang matuklasan ang mga interes, pangangailangan at commitment ng iba. Influence of organizational culture will be discussed by Chelsie de la Cruz.
Influence of organizational culture. Organizational culture is another important factor that shapes the strategic direction of an organization and thus the behavior of its member. It is a holistic, historical, determined, social constructed, shared organization, variable made up of symbols, hero, rituals, and values. First, ano nga ba ang organizational culture? Organizational culture is a collection of values, expectations, and practices that guides and inform the action of all team members. Alam naman natin na once na tayo nakapagtrabaho na, iba't ibang culture ang makakasama at makakasalamuhan natin. Kaya ang organizational culture ang naghubog sa isang organisasyon kung paano tayo makitungo sa mga empleyado natin at sa mga kapwa-tao at empleyado natin. Symbol are words, gesture, pictures, or objects that carry particular meaning in a culture. Heroes are person, alive or dead, real or imaginary, who possesses characteristic high price in the culture, who thus serves as a behavior. Rituals are collective activities that are technically superfluous but are socially essential within a culture. Ang sumisimbolo daw ang culture natin sa kung paano tayo magsalita at kung paano tayo kumikilos. Ang heroes naman, ito yung mga tao na nagiging model natin kung paano dapat na ang ugali natin. Ritual naman, ito ang mga pagsama-sama ng mga activities na hindi naman gaanong kailangan pero mahalaga sa isang culture. The core of culture is formed by values in the sense of broad, non-specific feelings of good and evil, beautiful and good, normal and abnormal, rational and irrational feelings that are often unconscious and rarely discussed and that cannot be observed as such but manifested in alternative of behavior. Ang pundasyon ng kultura ay binubuo ng kaugalian na mayroong malawak at walang pinapanigang kaisipan o pagtingin sa mabuti at masamang gawa, maganda o hindi magandang anyo, makatwiran o hindi makatwirang damdamin. Ang kaugalian na ito ay malibit na binibigyan ng pansin at kadalasang hindi naobserbahan ng mga tao na nakapaloob sa isang kultura. Bagamat na ipapakita ito sa iba sa pamamagitan ng kanilang pagkilos at pag-ugali. Next naman is organizational culture fulfills four important functions. First, it conveys a sense of identity for the organizational members. It can even constitute a source of pride in an organization. Second, it is facilitate the generation of commitment to something larger than itself. Third, it enhances social system stability. And finally, culture serves as a sense-making device that can guide and shape behavior. Organizational culture is the main guide that allows the individual how to interpret and respond to the environment. Ang una sa four important function, it conveys a sense of identity for organizational member. It can even constitute a source of pride. Ang ibig sabihin lang nito ay ang organizational culture ay isa sa mga paraan para maging maganda ang imahe at ang maging pride ng isang organisasyon. Second, it facilitates the generation of commitment to something larger than itself. Kasi syempre, naman sa maayos ang lahat ng employees at sumusunod sa organizational culture standard, magre-reflect ito sa kung paano mag-interact ang employees sa mga guests nila at maging result na magkakaroon ng magandang image ang isang organisasyon. Third, it enhances social system stability. Pag maganda ang pinoprovide na service ng isang empleyado sa guest, ay magkakaroon sila ng madaming potential na customer at magiging stable ang organization nila. Last, culture serve as a sense-making device that can guide and shape behavior. Ang culture daw ay nagiging paraan o guide para mas lalong mag-shape ang behavior ng mga employees sa isang organisasyon. So naman, ang organization culture is like to be especially influenced by key characteristics of the industry in its operates. Organizations are founded in industry based on assumption about customer, competitors, and society that form the basis of the organization culture. Ang organization culture ay isa sa mga nakaka-impluwensya sa kung paano mag-operate ng isang organisasyon. Ang organisasyon ay itinatag base sa customer, competitors, at sa mga society na nakapalibot sa organisasyon. In the hospitality industry, being customer-focused or centered and developing market-oriented practices appear to be widely shared value among the international hospitality organization. Similarly, as a result of pressure from the community, customer groups, and society hospitality organizations have adopted socially responsible values in the management practices and the daily operation. Ang hospitality industry daw ay nakapokus sa mga potential customer nila at kung paano mamamarket at maipoprovide ang mga services na ino-offer nila. Kasi alam naman natin na kapag ang customer ang nagbibigay ng buhay sa hospitality industry. So, kapag walang customer, wala ding hospitality industry. Founders and key leaders value also undoubtedly shape organization cultures. The culture backgrounds of these organization decision makers underlay their decision beliefs. These beliefs are transformed to the ordinary organizational member to shared practice, the company missions and policies. Ang cultural background ng strategic decision ay nakabase daw sa mga paniniwala at mga karanasan at mga company mission and policies nila. Company heritage is another determinant of organizational culture. The history of the organization reflects itself on the practices of organization as a tradition and accumulated experience. Isa pa sa mga naaapekto sa pagbuo ng organization, culture ay ang history at ang mga practices ng isang company or organization. According to Wilson, America played the central role in the world. American business system is the right system that gives people opportunities to build business, and by hard work and self-improvement, people can achieve great success rather. Wilson was considered to be more or promoter and salesman than an inner keeper. more an entrepreneur than a professional hotelman. According daw kay Wilson, ang Amerika daw ay nagpi-play ng isang malaking role sa mundo. Ang American system daw ay nakakapagbigay ng mga opportunities para magkaroon ng sariling business. Maging masipag at matyaga lang daw para ma-achieve nila ang mga success nila. When understood and successfully managed, organizational culture can lead to innovative business practices and sustainable source of competitive advantage. If an organization possesses an participative organizational culture, there's a strong set of shared core values about the organization stands for. Formation of a strategy involves setting widely shared objectives, teamwork, and regular communication with a decentralized management in structure. Implement of strategic requires understanding the core values of an organization, and it appropriately manage strong culture leads to wide participation and support of organization member with implementation of the strategy. Meaning lang nito ay kapag ang lahat ng employees ng isang organisasyon ay naiintindihan ng core values at marunong sumunod at mahal nila ang trabaho nila ay magiging successful ang organization nila in a long run. In an organization with an individual-centered organizational culture ritual dominate the organizational culture rather than the core values individual. With a strong emphasis on the performance of these individuals, the power and organizational culture are centered around a number of forming short-term tactics that rather than long-term goals. But the formation and implementation of a strategy are exposed to risks of organization from being independent to a certain individuals. Sa isang organisasyon na nakafocus sa pansarili o kanya-kanyang mga naising kultura, ang mga nakagawang bagay o kultura ang mangibabaw sa halip na ang pagtuunan ay ang mga importanteng asal ng bawat individual. Sa ganitong uri ng organisasyon, ang mga goals o plano ay bumabase lamang sa ilang mga tao na may matataas na posisyon o tinatawag nating leaders. Sa ganitong nakagawi ang pamamalakad, maaaring short-term tactics lamang ang kanilang nagagawa at hindi na nakapokus sa mga long-term goals. Ito ay maaaring maging risk ng isang organisasyon. The next topic will discuss by Reyneelyn Mercado.
The organizational context and the international perspective. Sabi dito, lahat ng mga elements na nasa labas ng boundary ng isang samahan ng HNT or Hospitality and Tourism Organization ay possible na makaapekto sa buong samahan. Sa buong samahan o organization, kapag daw may business ka outside national borders, pwede kang ma-impluwensyahan ng host country kasi andun ka sa environment nila. Pwede kang maka-encounter ng mga problema na kinakaharap mismo noong bansa na yun kasi doon ka nagbi-business. May mga hurdles daw na pwede kang harapin like political risk, economic barriers, cultural differences, and technological drawbacks na pwedeng makahadlang sa Hospitality and Tourism Organization sa paggawa ng kanilang strategy. For example, sa cultural differences, di ba alam naman natin sa ibang bansa, lalo na sa Amerika, uso yung racism. Nito lang last week or this week, maraming Asians yung natado doon. Ibinubugbog sila, ganun, or worse, pinapatay pa. So, pati yung ibang mga business doon na pagmamayari ng mga Asian, ganun, na-affect. Yung isang basang news, Filipino-Chinese man siya living in the US and natatrabaho siya sa tourism industry. Naglalakad lang siya pabalik sa office. Tapos, ano yan? Naglalakad siya sa office. Naglalakad siya pabalik sa office. tapos bigla na lang siyang sinaktan. Tapos, yung mga ganong aksidente, possible na mangyari pag sa ibang bansa ka nag-business or nasa labas ka ng national borders. Tapos, risk in abroad, risk in broad sense occurs whenever anyone must make a choice and the potential outcomes involve certainty. Ayan, normal lang naman na pag nade-decide tayo, may kaakibat na mga risk. So, meron daw tayong three main forms of risk. Ito yung political, economic, and socio-cultural. So, political risk, ito yung mga governmental actions or political motivated events na pwedeng makaapekto sa long-term profitability o yung mga kakayahang kumita sa pangmatagalang panahon. Siyempre, makaka-apekto din yun sa ng isang organization. Changing economic conditions are also considered a source of risk. So, sa economic risk naman, sa isang country, yun yung level of uncertainty tungkol sa kakayahan ng isang bansa na matugunan yung mga financial obligations niya. Cultural distance. Sa cultural distance between the organization's home base and the intended foreign market can also be a source of risk. Ano ba yung cultural distance? Ito yung differences and similarities between home and the host country. Consumer markets gaya ng languages, structure, religion, politics, economic conditions, level of literacy, and the like. Ang short-term effectiveness at long-term survival ng isang organization ay nade-determine doon sa actions na ginagawa nila in response to their external environments and risk related to them, particularly the organizational members' perceptions and interpretations of the organization's environment, and the response strategies are shaped by the internal organization's context. As for the risk, pwede daw nating ma-minimize yon through understanding a systematic approach to management, which is the latest tools of the management para i-promote ang personal responsibility, coaching, leadership, and so on internationally. Kung mag-fail daw tayo na maintindihan yon, hindi natin masyado naintindihan yung cultural differences internationally at tinake mo yung unnecessary political and economic risk, it can cause negative acumen or perspective or yung mga opinions ng customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, at iba pang stakeholders ng isang organizations. So, to summarize our report, balikan natin yung mga binanggit ng mga reporters. Yan. Una, ang environment daw ng isang organization ay binubuo ng iba't ibang mahahalagang factors na nakaka-impluwensya kung paano ito nag-function. So, mahalaga din daw na ma-identify natin yung mga hospitality and tourism company stakeholders, tangible and intangible assets, core competencies o yung mga resources and capabilities that comprise the strategic advantages of a business, at yung mga distinctive competencies o yung mga core skills and practices na pwedeng makapagpataas ng level of competitiveness ng isang organization. Importante din daw sa pag-a-analyze ng internal environment ng isang hospitality and tourism organization ang four functional areas such as operation, marketing, finance, and human resources para ma-identify natin yung mga strengths and weaknesses. And ang three important factors needed for strategy formation and implementations naman yung organizational structure, culture, and leadership. And kailangan din na isang organization na i-manage ng tuloy-tuloy yung decentralization, organizational structure para magkaroon ng formality sa organization while leaving the room for empowerment to nurture innovative opportunity-seeking employees. Ang culture din ng isang organization ay pwedeng mag-lead ng mga bagong practices sa negosyo at pwedeng ma-maintain yung sources of competitive advantage. Mahalaga din na malaman at maintindihan natin na mabuti yung mga impacts of international environment inside the organization para sa future, hindi tayo mangangapa kung worth it ba yung opportunity na yun or isa pala yung unnecessaries. So, and lastly, kapag daw nag-a-analyze tayo ng isang hospitality and tourism organization's internal environment, it is better to look at all the preceding areas. These suggested analyses are not alternative to others, but they complement each other by each providing a different and complementary perspective.
That ends our report. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you gained some learnings about what we discussed, and if anyone has any questions, you can ask us and we will do our best to answer that. Again, thank you.